Destruction never comes with noise. She doesn't break down doors. She doesn't come with screams or threats. She arrives slowly, with a calm smile, a soft voice, and words that seem tailor-made for you. Man believes he has found peace, but what he doesn't realize is that this is the first step towards chaos. Because a man's destruction does not begin outside. It begins inside the mind. And what really brings you down is not beauty, nor desire. It's emotional access, the power of someone who knows exactly where to touch to completely disarm you. And the most disturbing thing, she doesn't even need to be cruel to do this. She just needs to understand her weakness. But there is one detail that almost no one notices, and that is precisely what separates the men who survive from those who are lost. I'll show you what that detail is. Sign up now, because what comes next will completely change the way you see female power. The enchantment. When the mirror forms at first, everything seems perfect. She seems tailor-made for him, likes the same things, laughs at the same jokes, talks the same way. Every word sounds like music. Every look seems to say, "I understand you." And he believes he has found something rare, someone who truly understands him. But what he doesn't realize is that behind this charm, there is a subtle process going on. She is watching every reaction, every smile, every weakness. She's not just connecting, she's mapping, discovering what makes him happy, what makes him insecure, and exactly where you can touch him without having to use force. Over time, the mirror that once reflected love begins to distort the image. What seemed like a connection turns into dependence, and the man, without knowing how, begins to live according to it, trying to maintain the same shine that won him over in the beginning. But the reflection has changed, and now, whoever looks at it no longer recognizes themselves, and it is precisely here that the charm turns into something much more dangerous. If you find this topic interesting, don't forget to like the video. The silent control once the spell sets in. The control begins, and the scariest thing is that it comes silently. She doesn't need to raise her voice anymore. Now, her power lies precisely in remaining silent. Every time she walks away, he feels an emptiness, an anxiety that is difficult to explain. Her silence speaks louder than any scream. She learned to use absence as punishment and affection as a reward. If he does what she wants, the affection returns. If you don't, the ice returns, and so without realizing it, he enters a game where love becomes a bargaining chip. A simple gesture, a phrase, a look. Everything revolves around pleasing her, about not losing that sparkle that won him over again. Little by little, he changes the way he speaks, acts, and thinks. You no longer make choices out of will, but out of fear of disappointing. And what was once love is now conditioning, a kind of emotional training disguised as care. When he realizes it, he is already trapped, obeying without orders, giving in without realizing it. And the worst part is that he still believes he does everything for love. But what happens when love turns into obedience? That's where the line between affection and manipulation starts to blur. And that's what we'll talk about. In the next topic, emotional manipulation, now the game changes completely. She no longer needs to pretend to be the mirror. Now she manipulates the reflection. When he tries to assert himself, she changes her tone. His eyes fill with tears, and suddenly he is the villain. When he asks a difficult question, she plays the victim, blames him, says he's cold and insensitive. And if he tries to pull away, she appears with the right smile, the soft voice, the touch he can't refuse. Everything is carefully calculated, a cycle that repeats itself. Pain, guilt, forgiveness. She hurts him, he feels bad, she comforts him. And so, man loses himself in an emotional web that seems like love, but is control. He begins to doubt himself, his intentions, his sanity. Did I overreact? Could it be my fault? No, it is not. The mistake was giving away emotional power to someone who knew exactly how to use it against him. And when a man does this, when he gives up power, he loses something even more valuable, respect. And without respect, love becomes fear, and fear becomes prison. Little by little, his self-esteem begins to dissolve, until he no longer knows who he is without her. Have you ever felt manipulated? Leave a comment below and let us know how you felt. But what happens when he finally tries to escape this cycle? That's where the most dangerous part comes in. And that's what you'll learn about in the next topic. The destruction of self-esteem. Little by little, the man begins to disappear. Not all at once, but in pieces. He stops doing what he loves, distances himself from his friends, and loses the sparkle of what once made him feel alive. Every choice now needs approval. Every word is measured, every step depends on it. He begins to doubt himself. Before, he made decisions with confidence. Now, he apologizes even when he hasn't done anything wrong. Believe that if you try a little harder, maybe she will smile like before again. But it doesn't come back, because the game is already won. She no longer needs to shout, demand, or punish. He does it himself for her. He tries to please all the time. He molds himself. He annuls himself, believing that this way he will maintain love. But what he doesn't realize is that love has already turned into emotional obedience. And with each attempt to be better, he moves further, away from who he really is. And when a man loses his own identity to keep someone by his side, he is no longer in a relationship. He is in a prison. Except the cell is now invisible, and the worst is yet to come. Because when love dies, what's left isn't emptiness, it's guilt. And that guilt is the last link in the chain that keeps him trapped. The guilt that holds you back even after everything. He still feels guilty. Guilt for not being able to be enough. Guilt for believing in empty promises. Guilt for still thinking about her, even though I knew how much it hurt. This guilt doesn't scream. It whispers. It appears in moments of silence, in the nights when he tries to sleep, in the memories that insist on returning. He wonders what he could have done differently. He goes over conversations, scenes, gestures, looking for where he went wrong. But he doesn't understand that the mistake was never to love. It was to erase himself in the process. Because when a man loves more than he respects himself, love stops healing and begins to corrode. And it's this guilt that keeps you stuck with someone who's already gone. She moves on with her life, while he remains trapped in a story that only he still carries. But the truth, however harsh, is inevitable. She didn't destroy it alone. He participated, not out of weakness, but because he had confused surrender with love, and submission with loyalty. And the most painful part comes now, when he finally realizes that the prison was never her. It was always his own heart. But what happens when this man decides to break the chains? That's where the real rebuilding begins, and that's what the next part is about, the reconstruction of the mind. There comes a time when the silence becomes unbearable. Not her silence, but his, that inner emptiness that appears when he finally realizes he has lost everything. Love, identity, direction. This is the point where many men believe it's over. But this is precisely where the new beginning begins. Reconstruction does not come all at once. It starts in small, almost invisible steps. One day, he hears an old song again. In the other, he decides to go out alone, without needing approval. Little by little, the voices that made him doubt himself became quieter, and a new one appears, timid but firm. I'm still here. It is at this moment that the man begins to see himself again. Look in the mirror and recognize not what was destroyed, but what survived. He realizes that pain has shaped him, but not defined him, and that the power he once gave away can also be taken back. But to do that, you need courage, the courage to forgive yourself, because healing only begins when he understands that he was not weak. He just loved the way he knew how, and yes, he was manipulated, but now he understands the game, and whoever understands the game is no longer a piece. That's where man is reborn. More cautious, more aware, more whole, and for the first time in a long time, he feels something real. Peace. But there is one last step, the most important of all, the one that turns this peace into strength. And it is about this final step that we will talk about next. Conclusion. The liberation. A woman can destroy a man, yes, but only if he allows it. Her true power was never in her beauty, nor in her words, but in her access it grants. It is when he opens up too much, tries to prove too much, loves without limits and forgets himself that destruction begins. Because no one breaks what is armored inside. A man who masters his own mind is impenetrable. He may love deeply, but he does not lose himself in love. He can surrender, but he cannot extinguish himself. Know the difference between connection and dependence, between affection and control, and that's what makes you free. Not because you're alone, but because you're whole. Liberation does not come when he forgets her, but when reconnect with yourself. When you realize that true love doesn't ask you to dim your light so the other person can shine. And in that instant, He stops being a victim of manipulation and goes back to being what he always was. Man, master of himself, master of his own peace. But there is something that almost everyone ignores. Before destruction happens, there are subtle signs that show when she begins to test his emotional limits. And in the next video, I'll show you how to spot these signs and cut off control before it starts.